Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan and welcome to Words in Time. Now I'm very excited for today's video because we're going to be talking about Howling Dark, the second book in the Sun Eater series by Christopher RUOCCHIO. Now if you saw my Empire of Silence review, the first book in the series, you'll know that I love that one, so I couldn't wait to start this one. So without giving too much away, what is the premise for Howling Dark? Well, 48 years in the future after the events of Empire of Silence, our melodramatic protagonist, Hadrian, has spent 12 of those years awake, but the rest in a cryonic fugue. And while awake, he has been traveling through space in order to find a mythical planet as part of a plan to stop the war with the alien Cielcin. So, continuing on with something that I love from Empire of Silence is Christopher RUOCCHIO's writing. The prose is as good as ever, it's absolutely beautiful, but I would say the tone is a little darker in Howling Dark. You can see that progression from book 1 to book 2. And I still enjoyed the format. I really liked following Hadrian's point of view, and Christopher RUOCCHIO uses that as a tool to build tension really well. He provides great insights, both in the moment and also with the advantage of future perspective from Hadrian to just give us those little treats, little foreshadowing moments as we follow Hadrian's story. Now, something else that I think Christopher RUOCCHIO does really well is write fight scenes. He is very active online if you've seen him on YouTube or in Discord servers, and something that he mentioned that I thought was really cool was that he has trained in fencing and boxing. And so I am certainly no empirical gladiator myself, but I have been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for over 10 years, so I'm quite familiar with grappling, and in fight scenes when describing them, there are certain words which will ring true or won't, and the fight scenes in both Empire of Silence and Howling Dark are just awesome. They're so vivid, they're so visceral, and yeah, you really feel like you're right there. The tension is high, the action is high, something that continues to be awesome in part 2. Now, the pacing of this book, there is a little bridge to be caught up. There's a little catching up to do as we have that time jump at the start of the book, but once you get up to speed, the plot really gets going, kicks off with a bang in Howling Dark, and this is a 750-page book, and I never got bored, which is really impressive. The pace is not breakneck the whole way through. There are moments where the story will breathe, which I enjoyed. I thought some of those sections were maybe not quite as entertaining as similar moments in Empire of Silence, because in the first book we were always learning something new, whereas in the second book it's not so much that we weren't learning, but there was a bit more questioning. Hadrian is often thinking, what's going on? I don't know. What am I doing? I don't know. Which is totally believable for someone put into the situations that Hadrian is put into. But just how entertaining those all are may vary for you. But there's never too long without a moment that will just change the story like that. It's gonna rock Hadrian's world, it's gonna rock your world, and I'll talk a bit more about the ending, spoiler free of course, later on in the video, but yeah, this really comes home with a bang. So after pacing, we have world building. Now, in Howling Dark, we get to view a little bit more outside, what the universe is like outside the control of the Empire. So we get to learn a bit more about extrasolarians, about the Cielcin, and I think we probably world hop a bit less. Empire of Silence takes us to quite a new locations. Definitely get to some locations in Howling Dark, but I think we focus a bit more on a few places, and so there's maybe a little bit less physical world building, but more conceptual world building. We really get to examine and see an expanded view of what the greater implications are for the actions taken, the moments that happen in the storyline on the wider universe, which was something I was really looking forward to and really enjoyed in Howling Dark. Now, moving on to characters, Hadrian, of course, is our main character, and he's a little older, perhaps a little wiser, and I think he's a little bit more self-reflective now, but he can still be quite brash at times, even petulant. Hadrian is really put through the emotional ringer, and you can see that that starts to take a toll on him at times. And we get introduced to some great new characters in Howling Dark, but we also get to develop some existing characters as well as some existing relationships. So there's quite a big cast in the book, but Valka, Switch, Basander Lynn, Rain Smythe, and more, they all become closer or more confrontational with Hadrian. So it's very interesting to see how each of those relationships plays out. And that also applies to the antagonists. Empire of Silence, the story arcs, some of them were somewhat self-contained, whereas I feel like the interactions that Hadrian has with perhaps some opposing forces seem to be a little bit more overarching in Howling Dark. So there's quite a lot of depth there, which I really, really enjoyed. So what are some of the themes that Howling Dark explores? Well, something that I wanted in Empire of Silence was just a few more sci-fi concepts. You know I love my sci-fi, and boy, does Howling Dark deliver on that. So one of those is we're introduced to more transhumanist, cyborg type characters, humans that have got embedded and reliant upon merge with some pretty crazy technology, which was really, really interesting to read about. And what was also interesting was how Hadrian reacts to those people, because he finds it quite unnatural. And it was quite interesting to try and decipher whether that was because of the chantry, the propaganda, the anti-technology, religion, religious laws and rules, or whether that came from within Hadrian himself, or is there something inherent in the laws of nature that makes this wrong? So I think if you like cyberpunk, there's going to be some new elements in the series that you're really going to like in Howling Dark. Another sci-fi element that I really enjoyed, and I always like in pretty much any form, is AI, artificial intelligence. Now, I believe it was believed that AI machines have been eradicated, but Hadrian learns that might not be the case. And so that poses some great questions, as in how are they formed, how do they operate, what do they know, and what are their motivations? I think that this a real game-changing chapter in here, and if you like that kind of thing, maybe the Technocore from Hyperion, the Fall of Hyperion, quite different, but just that kind of world, that space, if you like those concepts, this is going to hit for you, hopefully, like it did for me. And something else that I really enjoyed in Howling Dark was the characters are asked a lot of questions, and there's a lot of strategic questions that characters are trying to solve, but also moral questions. So it's very interesting to see the way that plays out, not in a preachy way at all, but to see how different characters will make decisions, which characters will think what actions are acceptable depending on what outcomes. And are there certain actions that are just inherently unjustifiable? And Hadrian has to make some big decisions. We know from chapter 1 of the very first book that at some point Hadrian makes a very big decision. So it's interesting to see how that plays out, especially because me personally, I'm rooting for Hadrian, but that doesn't mean I always agreed with him. There were definitely some decisions that I didn't necessarily think were correct or justified. So there's that real push-pull there, adds another layer of tension to the storytelling. So putting all of that together, overall, what did I think of Howling Dark? Well, I loved how it kicked off and the ending. My goodness, the last 100 pages or so, I felt multiple times I was reading the book, and I would just have to look up and pause and just... Stunning, guys. Absolutely rocked. If you haven't read it, I can't wait for you to get there. If you have, you got to get down into the comments or send me a message and let me know what you thought of the ending. Now, compared to Empire of Silence, I would say I preferred the downbeats, maybe just a tiny bit more of Empire of Silence, but otherwise I love the introduction of the new sci-fi concepts, and I think this book takes some really big and ambitious swings that not only made the book great, but I think are going to really set up the rest of the series and benefit the rest of the series as a whole. So, giving it a score, I'm going to give Howling Dark a 9 out of 10. I love the second book just as much as the first one. Don't make me choose. That's a difficult task for another day. I've already gone on and bought the third Demon in White and can't wait to read it. So, as you can tell, I'm pretty excited about Sun Eater, guys. If you have read it, let me know what you thought of it. If you haven't read it, am I selling you on it? Because I think pretty much everyone's going to enjoy this. If you like sci-fi concepts mixed with a bit of an epic fantasy feel, this is definitely for you. So, as always, guys, I really appreciate you watching, and make sure to like and subscribe for more sci-fi book reviews coming soon.